Good to go? Okay. Well, I hope everybody's logged on. We're going to get started. Welcome to Steps to Mitigate COVID-19 at Home. Kind of excited to give this presentation. Thankful to a lot of people that helped put it together. A lot of research backing this up. And we hope to give you some things today that'll help you. So my name is Greg Galletti. I'm an architect at DLZ, 30 plus years experience. I'm a UC, University of Cincinnati graduate, and I did some grad time at Rice and also some fine art classes at SMU. That's the formal education. The informal education is 20 plus years of experience in nature observation and tracking. That is a side thing that I got into quite a while ago. I was lamenting to a friend that I was a little irritated. I had just seen a piece of architecture down in Texas, which was a glue job of Southwest regional architecture and a few European things. And I knew the architect had just got back from Europe, and he obviously hadn't got everything together yet. So the house was kind of disjointed. And I was lamenting about to my buddy who was probing me by saying, hey, maybe you ought to run off to Europe. And there was a blue jay squawking a few houses down. And I said, Jude, I can't go to Europe. I don't even know what that blue jay's saying next door. So when I figure that out, then I'll think about going somewhere else. And he said, I got something that'll help you. And a few days later, in the mail, I got a book called The Tracker by Tom Brown Jr. And Tom Brown is heavy in the nature observation and tracking. He's got a website. You can look and see him, and have taken, I don't know, a dozen or so classes. But the main thing is a lot of dirt time, as it's called, looking at nature observation and tracking. And a side thing for me was the priorities of survival. Just some things out in the wild you can do in case, as he would say, a raccoon pees on your matches. What are you going to do? How are you going to make fire? How are you going to build a shelter if you got anything? And then when you figure all that out, you find that you can relax in nature pretty easily. So COVID-19 has hit us hard in shelter, and that's the main priorities of survival: shelter, water, fire, and food. Most people think about food when they're in a survival situation and they die of hypothermia. So shelter is a big one. And with us here at DLZ Architecture, we're about 60 plus in the Midwest strong, and we've got a whole background of environmental engineers, mechanical engineers, structural. So a lot of people come together when working on a project. It's pretty exciting, and it's nice to have the engineering horsepower to back up what we do. When this COVID-19 hit, I was worried because I have a history. I worked on the water side quite a bit, how to purify water in the wild if you have nothing other than boiling it. So I knew at that time, because I was working with a lot of environmental engineers, how dangerously small a virus is. And it was worrisome. So I started back in the spring. You can see my picture there in the middle, looking at some alternative mask concepts, because we did not have any masks at home, certainly not an N95. And I worked on some ideas. That's actually a vacuum cleaner bag there that I've adapted, and it actually works out pretty good, but I'm not going to talk about masks today. The second part of it was, what if I have to quarantine in the house? How can I do an isolation barrier if that has to happen? And the third thing was, and the most troublesome, is what am I going to do about the most significant priority with COVID-19? It's a little refresher on how COVID-19 is being transmitted. On the left is fomite, and that's getting it from another surface. We're not as concerned about fomite as an industry, because if you keep your hands clean and you don't pick your nose and rub your eye, the chances of getting COVID-19 from a fomite transmission are slim. Now, the other two are significant: droplets and aerosols. So to give you an idea, the smallest particle you can see with the naked eye is 10 microns, and that is a speck of dust on a window with the sun hitting it. Now imagine COVID-19 is 10 times smaller than that. At about 0.1 microns is about where viruses hang. They're about that size. The good news is COVID-19 is always attached to something, and it's a particle. It comes out through respiration. That's the main way we're transmitting it. And as a transmission droplet coming out of while we breathe, it typically comes out at about 1 micron and larger. And then it's transformed into aerosols and smaller particles. And that's what has really been tearing us up indoors. That 1 micron and the respiration, it's partially water. It's also been described as being attached to mucus protein, whatever that is. Pretty scary sounding, and even worse is other biomaterials. So the good news is it's coming out a little bigger, and perhaps that'll give us a little bit of recourse to help stop it. Now, interestingly enough, a couple years ago, I was talking to one of my Amish neighbors, and she was lamenting to me that her kids had colds, and that they have a large family. And when she was talking to me, I was thinking about the time when our kids were younger and daycare centers and school, and they'd migrate home with colds, and pretty soon we'd all particularly have it. And while I was thinking about all that, she said, "Greg, I just think it's in the air, that it travels in the air." It's kind of prophetic when we're talking about COVID-19 as aerosols. So I want to give you some basics about your filter at home. So basic residential and commercial filters are what's called a MERV 8. A MERV 8 is basic stuff. You can get it at Home Depot. MERV stands for minimum efficiency reporting value, and it's a way that the professionals scale the quality of the filters as far as what they can do and what they can't. As you can see on a MERV 8, we're only 20% efficient at the high scale. A MERV 13 is a little better. It's about 85% at the high scale, but neither one of us is helping. Neither one of them is helping us stop aerosol COVID-19, or they're going to be very ineffective. The other term that you will hear is, "Oh, I have a Hepa system." Well, a Hepa system, a lot of people with allergens have Hepa systems in their home. They're a little better. I mean, you can see this is 0.3 microns to 1 micron, so they help out a little better on the small side. Now, the reason I'm going over these filters is a MERV 13 filter, you can upgrade your house to a MERV 13 filter. I believe you can go on Amazon and find a replacement size, and it's a little more efficient filter for getting particulates out of your airstream, so to speak. It's not going to solve the COVID-19 problem, but if you want to upgrade your filters, it's pretty simple. And I'm trying to give you things today you can do that are very quick to help you immediately. And then you can worry about the long-term stuff later. So that's a little background on a Hepa designation if you see it. You're also probably going to hear two things that may come up, and I've already seen ads on TV about upgrading your HVAC system in your house, heating system. One is UV, and the other one is coming, which will be bipolar ionization. I'm not going to get into either one of those in detail, but I think if you want more information, you can ask us and we can give it to you. But I think in a nutshell, we're not too excited about UV. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's not as effective as people might think. It also has mercury in the bulb, and I have a problem putting mercury in the airstream. If the bulb breaks, you got mercury going everywhere, and that's not a good thing. So I don't think you're going to see UV as being a highlight reel of effectiveness in the residential market. Bipolar ionization, very positive responses there. It basically blows the molecules up and can take out smell too. It has some real benefits. We like that a little better, and we are using that in some of our commercial installations that we're working on now. So the best strategy for COVID-19, and you've heard it over and over, is distancing and time. Time is giving you given the particulate matter that is a direct, large particle that hasn't got to the ground, time to get to the ground, and then through distancing, as it turns into an aerosol and is migrating around, that distance will dilute the virus with fresh air. And that is our number one most effective solution we have to COVID-19. It's not filters, it's distancing and diluting that air with air that isn't laced with COVID-19. Another problem with the residential systems is they're a closed loop system. Almost never do you have a system that introduces fresh air into your closed loop. Unless you open windows or a door, it'll migrate in through cracks, but it's not a formal dedication. So you can imagine if COVID-19 gets into your home, it's swirling around, getting circulated. The filter is very ineffective to eliminate it, so it keeps going around. So that's the first problem with the residential system, and I think that's why this system has really taken off, or the problems have really escalated in the winter. We're in there, windows are closed, heat's on, and it's just circulating the same virus around the house. The other low blow, as I would say, for COVID-19 is it loves low humidity conditions. And when we're heating in the winter, as you know, your skin dries out because the humidity level in your home is reduced, and COVID-19 loves low humidity. And I think the main reason is some of those larger particles are breaking down in low humidity conditions and staying airborne longer as an aerosol. So it's kicking our rear end in the winter, and here's two reasons why: closed loop and low humidity. So what can you do to solve that? Well, the first thing you can do is open your windows and get more fresh air into the house. That's a problem for us. We're in winter now. So you can't just open up your windows or you'll risk, thermal stress, and your plants will die because they're too cold, et cetera, et cetera. So what can you do? Well, in the picture you see on the left above that painting on the orange wall is a return air grill. And that is this room right here. Is air is being returned, and it's getting into the central system, going through the filter, and then it's dispersed throughout the house. What I would recommend you do, and we are doing it here, off to the right out of the picture, I've got a window slightly opened. And I'm talking about a gap that's probably, depending on how cold it is, 3/4 of an inch to an inch open. And what that is effectively doing is every time the heat kicks on, it's drawing air into the return air grill, and it's effectively diluting the air in the house. So I've got 2 return air grills. I'm going to show you where they are in a plan in a minute, but I am doing that in several locations because I want to introduce as much fresh air into my system as I can without, heating all the outside. So, again, if it was summer, the windows would be wide open, but they aren't. It's winter. So this is one strategy you can do. You can cheat the system a little bit, just providing an alternative source of fresh air. You can also go into all-on mode in your air conditioning system or your central air and heat system. Mine, it depends. You can either let it kick on when it calls for heat, or you can put it in fan on mode. And if you got fresh air getting introduced into your return air grills, you can effectively dilute the air in your house, and that is a very positive thing. I want to stop here a minute before I get into exhaust and answer a couple quick questions here. Our house does not have central HVAC. We have baseboard heaters and some window units for AC. What recommendations do you suggest? Let's see, answer live, I guess is what I want to say there. So I just answered this question the other night for a friend. They take out their air conditioners in the winter, the window units. So my response to them was crack your windows a little bit. If your air conditioners stay in, you know how you have a lot of times the accordion closure that seals them up against your the frame of your window. you can cheat a little bit and crack that a little more, just so you're getting a little more air. And if you can slightly get a little cross ventilation in a room, that would be the way I would play that. But again, the basics are dilute the air you have in the house, and which whatever means you have, and it's going to be opening windows is the main solution to that. Does ozone become an issue with bipolar ionization? No, it does not. So that's one of the benefits of it over the UV situation and some of the others. It does not produce ozone. Here's another one here. Long term, do you see any changes to building design coming as a result of COVID? For instance, do you see HVAC systems moving to a downdraft style like some hospitals have to pull return air down and limit the distance particulates are spread? One of the things we're doing architecturally on it, and I don't want to get too far off into the commercial world, but one of the things we're doing is we have our HVAC systems that are set up that they can go 100% outside air at the push of a button. So they're not recycling some of the air internally, so they can go 100% outside air. And your question is kind of getting to one of the more exciting things I think we see as designers, and that's kind of understanding the air path a little bit and solutions that we can do with our systems down the road a little bit to help prevent the transmission. Again, unfortunately, most of our HVAC and heating systems are not designed to purify air, only to protect themselves from dirt and debris so that they don't muck up the mechanism, the fan, and all that stuff. So we have talked a lot about this, about air path, and you're going to hear me talk about it more here in a couple slides. But to this question, the example I would give is, let's say you're in a conference room with 12 people on a long table, 6 on a side, and you got supply air at one end and return air at the other, and everybody breathing. If you're at the return air side of the table, you know, you're breathing some respiration that's come out of 6 to 12 other people in way on its route to the exhaust fan or the exhaust or the return air grill. So some of that strategic positioning of supply and return air, yes, I can see a definite response to that in the future moving forward. And we're already working on that on a couple projects now. And as a designer, it's an exciting thing. And I think, you know, we're going to have some solutions for that. All right. So the second thing you can do to dilute air in your house is through exhaust. COVID-19 is not self-propelled. It relies on air currents. So that's a good news. What does exhaust do for you? Well, if you're in a contaminated area, or as you can see here on the left or on the right, a kitchen hood, you can turn on the hood and it'll exhaust food smells and steam and whatever directly outside. So it is not commingling with the air in your house. So imagine a quarantine area where you got an exhaust fan working, you can draw out contaminated air and make it up with fresh air coming in at another window or something like that. In the bottom picture is a little toy I've been playing with because in the summer, I had my backup plan for increasing my ventilation in my proposed contamination area was a large window fan that I was going to put in this window, seal it up, and when I turned that bad boy on, it was going to draw air right through the room from another window. I can't do that in the winter. This house naturally ventilates very well because of prevailing breezes, but to augment that, I've been playing with this little fan here, and it's actually worked pretty well. I can just crack a window on the other side of the room, and this little bugger here, it's got enough horsepower to just a modest amount, a subtle amount of air I'll be able to introduce into the room. And that's pretty much all I'm looking to do in the winter, because again, I can't do big air changes all the time. So this is actually, I've been playing with this toy, and it's running off a battery from my tractor that I've got sitting on the floor, and I've been messing around with that. And but that's the scale of an exhaust. Any exhaust will make an air path. It will it will, it's the one thing as a designer that we can, now why did that not go forward? Let's try this. Boom, there we go. So let me give you an example of how exciting this air pass stuff is. So this diagram here is two windows. At the top you see A and at the bottom is B, and it has a window fan on the right. And that could be an exhaust fan, it could be a bathroom fan, it could be a fan above an exhaust fan above your kitchen stove. They all work the same way. Now imagine both window A and window B are both open, and they're both same opening, they're both wide open. The exhaust fan itself will draw air from the nearest available source, and that is like 100%. It will take all the air it can get out of window B and nothing out of window A unless it's maxing out what window B will provide, then it'll default to window A. So you can see here that as a designer, this is the thing you can control, because you can position seating. Like for instance, in this scenario, if somebody's coming to visit, I wasn't real, you might put somebody that might be at risk sitting in this seat, and any respiration coming out of them is immediately out the window. That's kind of a strategy. We're going to talk more about that. The other thing about this strategy, and people that have attic fans know what I'm talking about, if both window A and B are closed, it will want to draw air from the room next door off to the right. You can see an opening. It'll start bringing air from there to get to this exhaust scenario. So, it's a very exciting thing because this is the one thing we can control. It isn't natural breezes. It's an induced path that we create. So very effective, I think. Let's get the right button here. So the second thing you can do, again, I'm starting to think about how to isolate. If I got to go quarantine or somebody in the family has to quarantine, how could I do a better job of isolating that area? And I'm going to use this example. This is different pictures here, but we're going to talk about a fire station here for a minute. On the right up top is what's called the apparatus bay. It's where the trucks park. The guys come back from a run, or girls, they come back from a run. They lose their outer gear. They start their cleanup process, and away they go. Typically, apparatus bays are not air conditioned. They're not heated by forced air systems. They rely on ventilation, which is man-made, but also the big doors are always open if they're in there working, especially in the summer. So it's the natural environment. On the bottom, you can see a diagram we have here, and this is actually showing kind of a path of contaminated outer gear. That's the ABC. And then the path the firemen take to clean up and get back into the firehouse without being laden with contamination. So what you see here on the left is 3 zones. You see the hot zone, which is the apparatus bay in the picture, open air, trucks come in, they start up, they go right there. You have a neutral zone, which is in yellow, and we're going to talk about number 3. And then you have the cool zone, which is the area you want to keep the contamination from migrating to. That's the firehouse where everybody lives and sleeps, in the cool zone. So we do that mechanically 3 principal ways. At the bottom of 3, in the bottom left there, you can see a door, and there's a door at actually each end. So mechanical systems, we call it cascading air pressure. The air pressure in the cool zone is a little higher than the neutral zone, and both of them are higher than the hot zone. So whenever you open a door, air is always moving from the cold side, from the cool zone or clean area to the contaminated area, not the other way around. So you can feel that when you go into a lot of commercial buildings. You open up that door to get in, it's a vestibule, and sometimes you can feel a little sucking sound, or you can feel air moving out the door as you open the door. That's to keep car fumes and stuff from going into the building. So that's what cascading air pressure is all about. It's an active system, not something we can do in our home, but we can do 2 other things. That vestibule number 3 is, there's distance between the doors, and it's there for a reason. If the cascading air pressure is not working, then what will happen is when you open either door, it gives time for the other door to close. So we never risk a blast of air, wind, from blowing into the firehouse. So usually one door is always shut before the other one opens. A lot of winds come through the apparatus bay of a fire station. They've got big overhead doors, so it's very common. You want wind to come through there. You just don't want to blow in potentially contaminated air into the house. And again, door distancing is the way to do it. It's a very passive system. The other system we're doing here is, this is an extra couple steps between doors. And we have a walk-off floor system where it's going to pick up a lot more stuff off your shoe than just one step, two steps, and through the door. So, and the walk-off floor system can be removed and it can be cleaned regularly. And that whole vestibule can be hosed down, by the way. So that door distancing and the walk-off floor system, not as much, but the door distancing is something I'm going to show you that you can do in your home if you want to build your own isolation barrier. So I got to thinking about how I was going to do a vestibule, and you know, I told the guy helping me with graphics, I said, I need a diagram here that kind of shows you know, somebody thinking or something. And he came up with this one, and I first thought, wow, when I was in my survival charrette mode, I certainly wasn't standing there with a briefcase. So this is a little different, but I call it the design precondition. A lot of times with you as clients, we talk about goals and aspirations that you have, and we achieve them both architecturally and engineering support. That's what our goal is. I call it a precondition because one of my very good professors at Rice, he called it a precondition, and it's just the ground rules you're establishing for yourself to go about your design business. So I needed a simple solution to a vestibule, and it had to be easy to build because some of my friends are even older than I am, and it had to be something simple. It had to not take much time because I didn't know what condition I might be in. I mean, I might be sick and feverish and can barely move. And if I got to isolate myself, I need something simple. So that's kind of the second part. And with all the survival related stuff that I typically get into, you try to do it with available materials, not go out and buy a bunch of stuff that might not be available in a real crisis. So it's practice time, and I'm thinking about things that, you know, I might use. So the best thing I had, and I had it laying around, and I didn't have to study long, folks. I live kind of on a farm, and I've got plastic sheathing all the time for all the various things that I got to cover up or temporarily or long term. So I knew I had some sheathing. This is 4 mil, which is not real thick. It's not painter grade, but you can also get this in 6 mil, which is very heavy. Probably a little overkill for what I'm going to show you. But the good thing about 4 mil plastic, it's lightweight, it's inexpensive, and it's non-porous. And again, I'm worried about aerosol COVID-19. I want something that isn't very fibrous that might stop things. Also, you need a staple gun or very small nails. And of course, duct tape. You need that for everything. So I don't know, I have a good substitute for survival duct tape, but there are some instances where you could apply this plastic that I think duct tape could work pretty well, and I'll mention those here in a second. So I want to do a vestibule, and I'm using the existing door as one side of my vestibule, and we want to build a little enclosure to help prevent air migration blowing from the contaminated room into the main part of the house. And if this is going to run here, this one, if you can imagine, on the other side of the door is a contaminated area. I'm rolling up the plastic at the top into a roll, and then it's secured right across the top of the doorway. Then it's going to fold in the side that I'm going to actually access. So now I'm bringing that rolled edge from the side over to the door frame, and I'm going to secure it about, you know, about a third of the way down from the top, because I'm going to exit through that flap, and then I'm closing the other side. Boom, 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 with your staple gun right into the wood trim of your door, by the way. If you have wood trim, just staple it right in there. and then ballast the bottom with weights of any type. I had a toolbox, and could be some heavy books. The side on the right is going to be a fixed side, so I'm not going to mess with that too much. I'm going to come and go through the side on the left and go into this room here. So that's utilizing a door as the other side of your vestibule. So the idea with this is to get in there, close it up, and then slightly open the door, move in, and close the door. I think if you don't have a door, and in my house installation, which I'll show you in a minute, I don't have a door where the opening is, I gotta close. So I'm gonna do two of these, one on each side, and you're actually gonna go in between them and then close one side down as you migrate through the other side. So again, what this is mostly there to do, it's not an airlock, but it's there to prevent a gust of air in the contaminated area from blowing into the main part of your house. And you guys know in the summer, you got your bedroom windows open. Let's say this is a bedroom on the other side. You got your bedroom windows open, you open up the door, and sometimes whoosh, the wind comes right in. So that's what this vestibule is trying to prevent, that type of migration of air. Not as big a problem in the winter, but in the summer, where you're maximizing your airflow in the house, it is a problem, and this is one way to prevent it. One thing about the survival techniques, and I would encourage you all to try this before you actually need it. In architecture and engineering, it's pretty simple. We try not to make the same mistake once. And that's our industry. That's where you're at. And I've learned with the survival techniques, you can do stuff, you will screw up the first time you do almost everything. And that doesn't matter if you're making a shelter, doing a bow drill fire, et cetera, down the line. So it was real important to me to try one of these out. So I did out of my laboratory, and tried some different things, trying how to fold it. I was actually making one that went over a door that I could still utilize the door. And that's a little more complicated to do that, but I started there, and I'll tell you what it did for me. It made me think of this plastic as an enclosure, not a flap. So if you just put a sheet of plastic down there and you open the door and the wind's blowing, it'll just blow your flap up and the air's just going to migrate through. So again, thinking of this more as a rectilinear box, drapery, if you will, was kind of the way a little bit of practice worked. And I had some fun, and it was trial and error, and I was screwing up. And, you know, again, you just trip, stumble, and fall the first time, and then you kind of got it down. So that's a little background there. Let me see here. Does ozone become an issue by now long term? Okay. I got more questions here. Let's stop and see. How much does an air-to-air heat exchanger cost? Is that being put into new houses? And how easy is it to install in an existing house? You know, Bruce, I don't know exactly the answer to that. The problem with some of the systems in your home, I mean, with COVID-19, you're only as safe as the person next to you. If they've got COVID-19 and they're a transmitter, you can have the best filter system in the world, and the air's going by you, and you're inhaling it from somebody that's infected, and they don't even know it, and you don't know it. So that's why I'm not that keen on a lot of the upgrades to your residential system, other than keeping your windows open and introducing fresh air yourself. I think it's your best benefit. Would a fireplace, gas or wood help in venting a house? Yes, it will. I will show you an example here in a second. So if you have fireplace, you have wood burning in a fireplace, it's basically the same as an exhaust fan. As you guys have probably noticed, you can open a window in that room and it will draw air from the window to feed that fire. So it creates an air path. So, you know, when I'm sitting in the house now with a fire going, I'm the one my wife's working from home. I'm out and about during the day. You know, I sit in the airstream. So most of my air is going right into the fireplace as I'm breathing. It's not intermingling with the rest of the room. So yes, I'm glad you asked that. That's Henry. Good. The fireplace actually makes a air path. So that's a good thing. What was going to be your plan B if no sheathing was available? So my plan B, first thing I was thinking was, well, I've got several really good sleeping bags, and I'm interested in building a barrier that's layers, because if it's fabric, an aerosol is going to go right through it. So I'm thinking of layers. So I was thinking, well, I could use sleeping bags. I've got a couple that zip together. They'd be perfect. But I was not in the mood to nail them into my opening to play with that. So I would suggest sleeping bags were my plan B. C was going to be, if I didn't have those, was going to be a lot of different sheets. I was going to try to baffle something up so it wasn't going to be one sheet. It could have been 3, 4, 5 or more sheets, trying to make a baffle that could catch as much air-blown particulate matter as possible as I built my barrier. Okay. See, this thing always wants to reboot after I wait too long. Okay. All right, let me go back. Let me run that one more time. It's kind of cool. So I had a bunch of pictures of me building my enclosure, and as you'll see, plastic doesn't look that good in a photograph. You know, it just wasn't very handsome, and we really thought, well, let's just do an animation, kind of show you guys kinetically how this would work. So if you wanted to try this, if you have young kids at home, I can tell you this is a great project. They'd be enthused as heck to help daddy or mom build a little enclosure as a practice session. This piece of plastic, it's 10 foot wide, so I've got extra, and that's good. It helps with the enclosure. Rolling it up for the edges at least 6 inches, a foot even at the top. You got plenty of plastic, just do it. And it effectively makes a pretty nice little gasket. Again, it's not an airlock, but it seals pretty good. And I just thought, you know, with 5/16 inch staples, bang, 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 right across the door frame on the wood, because it won't split the wood like a nail will. And all you're left with is some holes you could putty and nobody would even see it. So it's pretty simple. If you didn't have wood trim around the door frame, if it was just a drywall opening, that's where I might think about the duct tape. And I would do it across the top and the side that is fixed, because you're not moving that much. And I think the duct tape would stick and stay there. On the side where it's open, I would do it down the side to where I wanted my flap to open. And then maybe double it up there, put a bigger piece in there, you know, to hold it, and then just deal with that little bit of flap. So, and you can position that up against your wall by how you position the ballast at the bottom. You can get that up there pretty tight. So again, it's a simple tool to build a little vestibule. This is a plan diagram. I'm going to kind of, every house is different, but I'm going to show you a few things here that are a recap, so to speak, of what we've talked about. My isolation area that I'm proposing for this house is in yellow. The good thing about it is it's got a separate bathroom and a bedroom, which is in the isolation, where it's labeled isolation. That is conceivably the sleeping area. Get good natural ventilation through here. If it's the summer, the windows are open and I'm just letting it blow through here. I don't have to leave to go to the bathroom. The only thing I got to do is get some food somehow, and I'm not too worried about that for a while, but I can either sneak out or have it brought in through the vestibule. The other thing that is good about this isolation area, and the most important thing from setting one up, is you do not want to be in a room where your return air grills are. So in this diagram, there's 2 return air grills. They're both with the orange kind of yellowy asterisk. The one on the right is the one you saw in the picture that was on the orange wall. So I am feeding these return air grills with fresh air by cracking the nearest window. And I've been changing window positions, and I've actually been opening these up a little more at night. So there's more fresh air getting fed into the return air grills. The red barrier you see that's my little vestibule. So 2 pieces of plastic on each side of that opening. And again, I want to keep, in the winter, I want to keep air from the isolation area to getting to the return air grill. So that's the main purpose in the winter of that isolation barrier, if I got to quarantine myself or anybody. So that's the plan there. Now that return air grill in the middle, above it, it says fresh air. That's the one that if I did have somebody in a quarantine situation, I would keep that window a little more open, because I want that return air grill nearest the isolation area to be sucking fresh air from outside, not pulling air through from an open window in the isolation area. So again, I want that barrier to be pretty tight there, and I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to make that window a little more open near that return air grill, so it wants to get it there, because I know it'll pull it from the nearest source. And if I got enough to feed it, I don't have to worry about it sucking air out of the isolation area. So that's a little bit of strategy. You can see another thing, E, which is up at the top of the isolation area. That's my little bitty fan that you saw in the earlier picture. That's where it'll go, because there's a headboard of the bed right under it. And my thought is, if I'm laying there and I got COVID-19, I'm going to exhaust as much out as I can. And that's exhaust is good. And I want to make it up with small cracks in the windows, so I can get makeup air or fresh air to augment my own respiration. Do not sit in a closed room with COVID-19 breathing your own air. You're just perpetuating it back into your lungs. And we haven't seen a lot of studies of that, but I'm really worried that that will cause it to escalate. So you want to give your antibodies in your body enough chance to fend the thing off. And fresh air is your friend, not your own breath. So think about that. You can also see some of the air paths. Those are the blue arrows coming in. So I'm trying to feed my return air grills. On the right over there is a fireplace. I know Henry had asked about that. And I put a little arrow in that one window kind of turning toward the fireplace. Well, if I got a fire going in there, that's where that I can get air from that window or the one in the front, it doesn't matter, and shoot it, make a path, and it'll go right to the fireplace and out. So again, it's an air path maker, a fireplace. Very good question. The room on the right is also, I'm going to talk more about a gathering area, but the room on the right is our gathering space. If somebody comes over, one of my buddies, for a beer or whatever, they want to say hi, they're not going to stay very long. I know that, or we're going to be outside fairly quickly. But if they are sitting in this room, my plan was I'm just going to open up all the windows. It'll be flow through ventilation. I'm going to turn the heat off, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, because I don't want unwanted respiration going into my return air grill going through the house. So I'm going to shut the HVAC off, because that return air grill is in that room, and open up the windows. And yeah, it's winter, it'll be a little chilly, but again, I don't want to be overpowering everybody with our own respiration indoors. It's just a bad strategy right now with COVID-19. So here is kind of a summary of what to do in a gathering scenario. Summer or winter. Winter, the openings are smaller, but you want to utilize natural ventilation. It's a temporary scenario. Even if you're sitting around watching TV with your family, and one of you or both of the parents are working and they're coming home, no symptoms, but we just want to be sure that it's not, you're not filling up the room with your own respiration. Utilize natural ventilation as much as you can. Distance as much as possible. It's hard in the house to distance, but again, the respiration coming out in close proximity, if the person is a COVID-19 carrier, is loaded with virus. You get further back, it starts to hit the ground, and now you're dealing with the aerosols. They're being dispersed and diluted. That's a good thing. Isolate the room if possible. So I told you my scenario. I have a return air grill in there, so I'm going to turn off the HVAC if I've got a group gathering in that room. Again, it would be a very small group. So you got to always look with your isolation area, where are the return air grills? That is the most important thing. Yes, you can strategically put one upstairs when it's hot in the winter. Hot air rises, but it also dumps down the stairwell too if you're opening windows up there. So again, keep the thing out of keep an isolation area away from your return air grills. If you can do that, the likelihood of being recycled in your closed loop system in your house will be gone. So a couple buddies come over. I got my windows open a little bit. I'm promoting air changes. They leave. I open up the windows bigger, get a good air change in there, then I go turn my HVAC on. So I think I've purged the house enough, and again, it's a safety thing. The second thing, and I kind of want to end with this I think is probably the most important thing. So imagine you're a family of 4 or 5, you got kids, one of the parents is working or both of them. So, you don't really know if you're a carrier or not. So what strategies can you do at home to maybe prevent the transmission person to person in your own household? So sleeping, I would suggest this. Everybody sleeps with a closed bedroom door, and you close the door and you put most return air grills or most return air out of a bedroom in most houses, there's a crack under your door and it's drawing a little air under the door and it's heading off on its merry way to your return air grill. You want to stop that from happening. If it has a return air grill dedicated in the room, close it off. But if it doesn't, it's sucking it through the bottom of the door. Put a towel along there and then open the windows in your bedroom enough so you can just, it's winter, so I'm talking subtle openings, so you can augment the air in your bedroom with fresh air. That would be true of all the bedrooms. If it's a quarantine area, we've got a live COVID-19 person that's been infected, utilize exhaust if you can. If there's a bathroom in that area, turn the exhaust fan on. If you want to make a little exhaust scenario like I did, it's all a good thing. I want to get as much of the contaminated respiration out, and I want to replace it with fresh air from the outside. So, the good thing about that scenario is your HVAC system is going to be supplying warm air to the bedroom. So you want that. You don't want to, be sleeping in a 0-degree bag in the middle of winter trying to stay warm. So you're continuing the heated air coming into your room. You're just not letting the old air get back to the return air grill. And again, for sleeping with a family, that's when I try to maximize fresh air getting to those return air grills. Usually the return air grills are in main parts of the house. It could be a corridor, it could be a living room, it could be a dining, living combination. There's a return air grill. If you're not sleeping in those areas at night, crack those windows open a little bit so you're forcing a little more fresh air to get into the return air grills and ultimately to you in your sleeping area. So again, what you don't want to do is have somebody that may be at risk breathing air into the return air grills at night. You got 8 hours in there or so for sleeping. Try to keep your air separate. All the air coming through your heating system, you want to keep it as fresh as you can. I think that's the main import. Again, all these suggestions are trying to retard COVID-19 effects from escalating. I think that's the main thing that you can do with fresh air. And this is just some simple ideas for the sleeping thing. I think that's, well, we're going to do a little summary, and I'm going to hit a few questions here. See, we've got a bunch of them. Okay, well, that'll be a tough one to answer. So I kind of given you the overview of shelter, water, fire, and food, and basics of transmission of COVID-19. We're nervous about droplets and aerosols. This situation is basically kicking our ass in the winter inside. So, inside it's a problem. Outside, we own COVID-19. It isn't hurting us out there, but inside it's putting it on us, and it's not necessarily good. Natural benefits of distancing, again, it's dilution. We want to dilute as much air with fresh as we can. Unfortunately, our HVAC systems at home are not filtration. They're a closed loop system. They're going to circulate the same air over and over. And unfortunately, COVID-19 is thriving in the low humidity conditions. Okay. So winter dilution strategies, you're going to open your windows, but you're going to be subtle about it. I mean, you guys know what you can handle. Yeah, you're not trying to heat the whole environment outside. You're just trying to augment the air in your house, getting looped around with fresh air. And you can do it by feeding those return air grills. giving you some basics on exhaust. Again, as a designer, that's the one thing we can control. So you can play with that all day long about scenarios where, hey, I came home from work, I'm sitting watching TV with my kids. I want most of my air going out the window as an exhaust scenario, not intermixing with the air everybody else is breathing. Your isolation area, you want to utilize your floor plan attributes. We do this all the time. We get an addition we got to do for a client. The whole fun of the exercise is utilize the attributes that are there. Don't try to cut new openings in your house. You got to build from what you got. So if you can utilize a bathroom for a potential quarantine area, good. You can do it. Keep the exhaust fan on in there, and consider the return air locations in regard to those locations, where your exhaust is and how you can utilize it to your benefit. Now, I do want to say I was mentioning about turning on exhaust fans in bathrooms, and I know one fire district that we know pretty well, they have cautioned their constituents, be careful with exhaust fans. Some of them, like bathroom exhaust is a good example, they're not always serviced very well, especially if it's a rental property. You guys can probably know from motel rooms you've been in, the exhaust fan barely works, so it's so clogged up. So you don't want to create a fire in your attic. Obviously, that would be worse than risking COVID-19. So be a little careful with that. But otherwise, exhaust is your friend. Use it where you can strategically. And if you have to build a vestibule, I've given you a good, easy way to do it. Doesn't take much time. It'll help prevent that migration of air. Overall home strategies, giving an example of gathering where you just want to utilize as much fresh air as you can, and sleeping. Separate your air, try to augment the central system with as much fresh air as it can get. You stay in your bedroom with the window cracked, augmenting the air in the bedroom with fresh air, and hopefully that'll help. Our antibodies are working. I've known several people now that they've gotten COVID-19 and their significant other has not, and they've been sleeping in the same room together. So there's some benefits out there of our natural antibodies. They are working. I also know some people that have had this scenario, and I've given them some advice, and it hasn't transmitted to other family members. So again, I attribute that mostly to natural antibodies, not my strategy, but hopefully there's some tools here you guys can play with if you need them. I got a few questions here. Let me answer them. During a quarantine scenario with a shared bathroom, what steps do you suggest? I've tried to stay off the hygiene part of this with, the wipe down and that kind of thing. But I have thought about this scenario here, and I would recommend probably two things. If it is a quarantine situation where somebody has been diagnosed with COVID-19, in the bathroom, I would encourage them to take baths instead of showers. So you're reducing the amount of humidity laden steam, if you will, in the room. Regardless if it's winter or summer, if I had COVID-19 and I'm in the shared bathroom, that window would be as open as it could be. And yeah, it'd get a little chilly, but I'm trying to get most of that air out. If there's an exhaust fan in a shared bathroom, it's probably on almost all the time. The other thing you can do is you should close your lid to your toilet before you flush it. There is something called an air plume that comes out of a toilet. It's not the most pleasant subject in the world to talk about, but it is humidity laden air from that water spinning in there, and you want to reduce the amount of steam or contaminated moisture from a person that may have COVID-19 in that shared bathroom. I would probably have, if I went in there in a bathroom with COVID-19 diagnosed, I would probably have wipe down that bathroom before I left. And I don't know that you have to wipe it down as much as you could mist it with one of the cleaning things or alcohol and water that will do in COVID-19. I mist over some surfaces that are, might catch a little moisture. and out I go. That's probably the big one. And you know, a little scenario about that bathroom. So I'm in there, I got COVID-19, I'm taking a bath, I'm done. The window's been open. I shut the window before I open the door. So it just doesn't let that air just blow right into the main part of the house. Now the next person can go in and open the window again, but again, I don't want fresh steam and moisture getting blown into the house. So it's a little tricky, but I think that's probably what I would do. We are a family of 4 with 2 young children. What are a couple of baseline items we should consider to be better prepared? Wow, I like that question. So what I would recommend, we're up in a heating season right now. You know, you never know what is the next catastrophe that could take out our house or our neighborhood, tornado, name it. We're in the winter. I usually recommend that everybody in the household have a good sleeping bag. It's pretty cold here, maybe a 0-degree rated bag. I probably like down better than the natural fibers because they're lighter and they pack tighter. You know, you'll hear people say, well, down sleep bag, if it gets wet, loses its insulation value. Well, don't get your sleeping bag wet. Keep it in a tall kitchen garbage bag or something like that. But a down bag works a lot better for kids. If you got to migrate, you're not going to be able to load up your children with 50-pound packs. You're going to have a few items, and a sleeping bag in down rolls up about like this, so it's very small. I would probably do that. The other thing I would recommend is you have a good water purifier, portable one. Cascading makes one. I kind of like it. I'm not trying to sell a Cascading water purifier, but if you got to go mobile, you know, your whole neighborhood's been wiped out and you got to go somewhere, that will give you an opportunity to get water anywhere. There's all kind of ways you can do it. You can do it with pills. You can do it with, you know, they've got straws you can suck water through. But for a long term, let's say, you know, power's off for a week in the winter, half your house is destroyed. You might be sleeping in your sleeping bag and there's no water available. You know, what are you going to do? So I would think about that as those 2 things, a sleeping bag and a good water purifying system. So the virus settles to the floor when you turn off the heat. Will they become resuspended in the air? Gordon, I don't know the answer to that. One of the things that's got us worried about how this thing just lit up the country in heating season. I almost can't believe it isn't just us transmitting it to each other, that some of the droplets that have fallen to the ground may dislodge and go airborne again. I don't know. I think that's something that we need a little more information on, but it is a concern. Again, it's the airborne stuff. So, you know, actually that bipolar ionization that I talked about, that one of the benefits of that is it will mess up COVID-19 virus on a surface. So as those particles get blown apart and bipolar ionization has the ability to mess with some of them on a surface. So that's one of the reasons we're kind of excited about that one. I have an older home, 1930s, that has return air grills at the floor level in every room, supply on interior walls, returns on outside walls. If a bedroom needs to be quarantined, should I seal off the returns from that room? Yes, definitely. Seal them off. I would probably try to get a piece of plastic down, something non-porous, so you could seal it and then weight it down so it doesn't move when the air's moving. But yeah, that would be perfect scenario there. Close all that off, play the game with a little open window and use the heat from the house to keep you warm. In my home, most rooms and all bedrooms have a return air vent. What kind of steps? Okay, that's kind of the same question, other than making sleep in the garage. Yeah, that's funny. So yes, you would just block all the return air grills. And it is kind of funny, when I was going through this thinking, oh, Greg, man, what if you get COVID-19? What are going to be the symptoms? We didn't really know back in, you know, March and early spring. and I was going through all my scenarios. Well, I'm going to build a vestibule, and I'm going to put an exhaust fan in there, and I'm going to open windows, and I'm worried about fever. Should I have a little fan just blowing on my forehead? Blah, blah, blah. And I finally said, you know, I'm pretty comfortable outside. I'm just going to move outside and sleep under a tree, because I do that a lot anyway. And again, that was summer coming in the spring, and now we're in winter. It's a little more problematic, but again, fresh air is your friend. Bedrooms in our house have one door and one window. How would you circulate air in that environment? Again, I would do the trying to close off. I would crack the window, and that would be a good example to have a little small fan in there just to move air around like this in a circle, up, however the fan's placed, and then play with it a little bit and see how open you got to get that window so you can feel a little air coming in. So the question's good. Obviously, if you got two windows, flow through ventilation is possible. If you just have one, it's a little tougher, especially with your bedroom door shut. You're not getting flow through to another room. So again, try to keep the respiration air from getting to your return air grills. That's probably the best answer I have for you. It's not optimum, but you can open that window enough, you can get some fresh air in there. I think with that, I think I've exhausted all my questions. I think we're probably about out of time with that, folks. I think we'll sign off. If you've got any questions, you can get a hold of us here at DLZ. They'll get the questions to me. If you've got a scenario with your house you don't know the answer to, send it. We'll be happy to help. I love answering these kind of questions. And with that, folks, have a great day, and thank you for your time.